hello everybody. I'm back. Today we're finishing up my nails and we're finishing up our story of when the tripods came. Well, hello everybody. Me from the future. I want to let you know I messed up and I didn't get any of the footage from my overhead camera. So there will be no nails in this episode. I thought I had fixed it, but I did not. So, sorry. If you're new here, welcome to the Nail Coven. On Wednesdays, I do my nails and I tell you about the latest book I've read. Now, this is the second part of a two-parter. I will link the previous video below. I'm kind of pissed because I lost my overhead camera during my last shoot when I was doing the fill. Ran out of room because I forgot to check. Pissed. So hopefully this one will look better and you'll actually get to see what I'm doing. All right, so anyway, I'm also getting over a cold. My voice is very raspy and annoying and I keep coughing, but let's get these done. Let's get this done. All right. So when we left off, the family had just hijacked an airplane because they want to go to Switzerland where their stepmother is, but there's no flights in and out of Switzerland. So they get on a small airplane with about 40 passengers that's going to England. And they bring their grandmother's pistol with them and they hijack the airplane. And the pilots were surprisingly chill about it. They're like, okay, where do you want to go? And Martin, the father, says Geneva. He's like, all right. They just barely make it on the fuel that they have. They land in Geneva, and of course, the authorities are waiting for them. They were ordered to disembark the airplane. Lori's father hands over the pistol, and them, the pilots, and all the passengers are taken into the terminal and into a waiting lounge. And there are soldiers there with automatic weapons. Then a senior officer comes in and he tells them all to remove their caps. And Lori and his family do so. But the pilot says, that's impossible. We can't remove our caps. But the officer insists. And the crew and the other passengers refuse to take off their caps. The soldiers forcibly remove them. The capped are screaming and crying. Lori said it sounded like animals being tortured. Then the family is taken to a briefing room and they are each interviewed separately. After that, they're taken to a hotel for the night. In the morning, they're told that they had been granted permission to stay in the country of Switzerland for 7 days. And when they get to Fernhor, I think is how you say the village's name, they have to report to the local police. And Martin, the dad, says, and then what happens after the 7 days? He says, your case will be looked at again and you'll go from there. And they were given their paperwork and off to the train station they go. So they're on the train and the train makes a stop and the boys decide that they want to get off to get some snacks or something. And they're in line to buy some candy or something like that. And they keep hearing somebody say dirty English, right? They're using racial slurs towards them. And it's these gang of boys about their age and they just keep calling them dirty English. And so they get in a fight with these boys. A policeman comes and he breaks it up and he takes the boys back to the train, back to their father. And by the tone of the officer, it kind of seems like the officer is blaming Lori and Andy. And his father's very upset about this. He's like, well, what are you going to do about this? And he's like, well, you can get off the train and you can come make a complaint with my boss, but I don't know how long that's going to take. He's like, or you could go back to England. So that didn't go over well. So I think this is saying how, xenophobia can start when there's civil unrest. So they get to their destination. Elsie's there waiting. It's pretty. Fern Horror was a small mountain village, and their grandmother and grandfather had a small inn there that was, of course, empty since, with everything going on, nobody was traveling. The only other person there besides them was their handyman, whose name was Jon. So there wasn't any more TV, but there was radio. And it seemed that, in the rest of the world, the Capt were in charge. Now, the Swiss were still pretty confident that they were fine because they had their mountains to surround them. They also had their army that all men between the ages of 18 and 60 were required to participate in. And, they had the attitude that for hundreds of years they have been able to stick to themselves. They were able to survive Napoleon and Hitler. So all they had to do was just stick to themselves and just be Swiss, and they would get through this. The family was able to get their paperwork renewed, so they were able to stay in the country. The villagers had a very poor attitude towards them. The shopkeepers, wouldn't help them, and nobody was friendly with them. And every time the boys went into town, they had to deal with this group of boys that would taunt them and call them dirty English. And the leader of this band of boys was the one and only policeman's son. There's only one policeman in the village, and his name is Rudy. Shortly after they got there and got their papers renewed, the German and French armies invaded Switzerland. The fighting was over very quickly. The Swiss lost, unfortunately. And so a report comes over the radio that peace and harmony have finally come to Switzerland, just like it has over the rest of the world, and hail the tripod. So the family kind of just sticks to their inn that's kind of up the side of the mountain and kind of away from the rest of the village. And one day, Lori's kind of up on the side of the hill, just playing around outside, I guess, and he looks down the slope of the mountain into the valley, and he sees a tripod going by. Huge, right? He calls his dad and he's like, take a look at this. And they realize, or Lori realizes finally, he's like, there's nowhere else for us to run away to, is there? And his dad just kind of shook his head. No. The following day, the boys go down into the village to get the daily bread, and they notice that all the villagers are wearing caps. They don't want to draw too much attention to themselves, so they very casually continue to the store and they pay for their food, and they're like, okay, time to get out of here. And they do see Rudy, and he's not wearing a cap. So they had heard a rumor that you had to be 14 to get the cap, or that they only capped those 14 and older. So as they leave the bakery, they run into the policeman, and he's capped. And he says to them, how old are you boys? He's like, surely you're 14. And they lie and they say, no, I'm only 13. And Andy says, well, I'm only 13 and a half. The officer says, He's like, I guess, Lori, he could pass for 13, but he's like, Andy, no, you're definitely 14. He's like, you're going to be capped. He's like, we're out of caps now, but there's another shipment coming tomorrow morning, so you'll be capped then. And, trying to play it cool, they say, okay, yeah, no problem. We'll be back tomorrow. And the officer's like, no, Andy's going to stay with me. Lori, you can go home, but Andy's staying with me. Again, they're trying to play it cool, and they're like, okay, no problem. Andy says to Lori, you'll tell Paul what's keeping me? And he's like, yeah, no problem. Paul will take care of everything, right? So on his way home, he runs into Rudy. And Rudy says, why isn't Andy with you? You guys are always together. Why isn't he with you now? Lori tells him that, he had to stay with Rudy's father, the policeman, because he's going to be capped tomorrow. And Rudy says, does Andy wish this? Well, he says, I don't know. He doesn't want to rat them out or give them away. So he says, I don't know, but does it matter really? Doesn't everybody get capped regardless? And Rudy says, they say so. So then Lori gets home and he tells the adults what happened. And he's expecting them to come up with a plan, figure out how to get him back. But they basically have the attitude that, Andy's on his own. He's a resourceful boy. He'll figure a way out. And Lori can't believe it. He's like, I told Andy Paul would take care of everything. They tell Lori that they can't risk it, that if they try to free him and it doesn't work, that's pretty cool, that they're putting everyone at risk. Also, Elsie's father is dying. Seems like he's probably got only a day or two left, and they don't need the villagers coming up here in the middle of all this to try and force caps on them. They can't get away right now. So they need to just leave Andy where he is, and Andy can figure out, he'll be able to get himself out. And this just upsets Lori so much. Andy is his friend. He promised him, and he's gonna have to let him down. Lori, later that night, gets some books from the inn's library, and he tells the adults that he's going to his room to read. But instead, he goes to the policeman's house where Andy is being kept. And he goes inside and he says, I brought my friend something to read. Can I give it to him? And the policeman's not there, but his wife and Rudy are there. The wife is like, you can leave the books with me. I'll make sure he gets them. And he's like, well, can I see him? Can I see my friend? The wife is like, no, he's in jail. But then Rudy comes in and he kind of says something to his mom, and his mom goes into the kitchen, comes back in a little bit with some snacks. Rudy tells Lori that he can wait till his father gets home if he wants, and they can ask him if he can see Andy. Lori and Rudy are kind of just hanging out. I forgot a part. When Lori was talking to his father about trying to get Andy out of jail, he was like, no, we have a plan. We're going to go up the mountain. There is a big tunnel up there that has a train in it that leads up to a ski resort and an observatory. And we think there's probably plenty of food up there, and we're going to go and we're going to hide out there for as long as it takes. Lori knows that he needs to get Andy as soon as possible so that they can go with the rest of the family up the mountain. Lori and Rudy are sitting there. Lori decides to kind of test Rudy to see where his mind is regarding the caps and the tripods and everything. And he asks him, they say that the tripods are, they're here for our own good. He's like, what do you think? And he says, I don't know. He says, does Andy wish to have this cap? And Lori's like, no, he doesn't. He's like, do you wish to get capped? And Rudy says, no, I don't. So they realize that, despite their past of not getting along, they're on the same team. Neither of them want to be capped. They don't trust the tripods. They don't trust the capped. Rudy says that he knows where his father keeps an extra set of keys to the jail. So he goes and he gets them. He gives them to Lori, and he's like, I'll go distract my mom. You get Andy out. So that's what they do. Lori goes and gets Andy. He's like, no time to explain. Just follow me. And as they're going out the front door, guess who shows up? Guess who's coming home right then? Policeman, and he's got a couple of his buddies with him. And they grab him and they put him back in the cell. They go to bed, and in the morning they're brought breakfast. And as they're eating their breakfast, Lori's father comes. He shows up and he says, I'm sorry. And he's wearing a fake cap. And he says, I'm sorry to hear that my boy was behaving badly. I'll take him home and I will punish him. He says, this other boy, he's under my care too. I'll take him home and punish him too. And the police officer says, no, he's like, you can punish them, but you can punish them here. He's like, you can beat them here. I'll get my strap. You can use mine. And his dad is like, okay, but I want to use my own strap. I'm going to go home and I'll be right back. And Lori thinks that was his father's way of just like abandoning the situation and just leaving Lori and Andy there and favoring his real family, right? His stepsister, his stepmother, and his half-sister. He always liked them better, and now he's choosing them over him. But he does come back, and he has a strap with him, and he also has Jan and Jan's shotgun. They tie up policeman and his wife, but not Rudy. They decide that Rudy's going to come with them. They tie them all up, and they figure they have, about 30 minutes before anyone becomes suspicious, because the policeman was supposed to come and pick up the next shipment of caps. So if he's not there to pick them up, people are going to know something's wrong. So they climb in the car, they head back to the inn. At the inn, Elsie and Martha, the grandmother, and Angela, they're waiting outside. They've got backpacks packed up. Lori finds out that Elsie's father had died in the middle of the night. So now was their time to get up the mountain. So they start hiking up the mountain, and it's a difficult trek for sure, especially for Elsie's mother. But they finally reach the train tunnel, and from there it's a little bit easier, though it's still very difficult. The train obviously isn't working. The place is deserted, the resort. Tourism is kind of a thing of the past now, along with human disorder and human freedom. The resort has plenty of food reserves because they were prepared in case they ever got snowed in. Also, water isn't an issue because they're surrounded by snow and ice year round. But they do decide that they should, this is after a while of being up there, that they should look for more food because, they don't know how long those reserves will last. They won't last forever. So they start going on little expeditions many, many miles away so that they don't make surrounding people suspicious. And they rob people and they steal from their homes, chickens, eggs, whatever. On one expedition, they find a girl who's not capped and they steal her too. So my nails are done. They look pretty good. Let's get the focused on here. It's pretty okay, I guess. Well, I don't like this jelly black. It just doesn't work for me. So my nails are done, so I'm just gonna finish the story. They take this young girl too, along with chickens and whatever food they can find. And she was fearful at first, but she grows to understand and ends up agreeing with what they did. So it's then decided that they are going to actively start recruiting young, uncapped people that they happen to run into, but they're not going to take them by force anymore. As time goes on, they're, raiding people, they're bringing on a few more people, and they notice that a tripod goes by the bottom of their mountain like clockwork, like every 4 days at the exact same time. And they're not sure, is this some sort of patrol? They're not really sure. But the father gets the idea that they should try to destroy the tripod, that they should try to force an avalanche to cover over the tripod as it walks by the base of their mountain. And everyone's kind of against the idea because it's like, hey, we're up here, we've survived so far, you might, alert people that we're up here, and all this, everything we did would be for nothing. They'll force us to be capped. But the father feels that they have to do it because survival isn't enough. They've kind of gotten that down. They're surviving, but the next step after self-preservation is to fight and to try to bring back the way of life that they knew. One way to do this is try and destroy at least the one tripod that they're aware of that comes by here every once in a while. So anyway, long story short, they figure out that they're going to use the shotgun at a certain time before the tripod passes by, and then they'll time it just right by shooting into the snow somehow, and then it will come down the mountain and it will cover the tripod. And that's what happens. So they're successful in this, and they've proven to themselves that the tripods, they can be destroyed. They feel that this is important not just for them and for the people that they're with, but word might get out, and there's probably others hiding places or pretending to be capped when they're not, and they need to know that too, that the tripods can be destroyed. So a year goes by, and Lori, Andy, and Rudy they're kind of sitting on the side of the mountain looking down into the valley, and they're talking about how they had destroyed the tripod and how one never came to replace it. So they're thinking that maybe the tripods aren't able to maneuver the mountains, and they see the mountains as dangerous. This is a small victory for them, and it's something to build on. And Lori's wondering that if someday in the future, will there be 3 boys like them sitting here on this mountain, but with hopes and looking forward to a day which could see humanity free. Lori decides that he's going to take it upon himself, that it's his responsibility to lay the foundation for that. And yeah, that's the end of the story. So this book ended on a more positive note than the original trilogy had. Was that there the whole time? Which made me feel good. Basically, I feel like this book is saying that no matter how much the odds are stacked against you, that even if it seems pointless, you still have to fight tyranny or injustice, because even one person can start the domino effect falling. Even if you never see the fruits of your labor, it doesn't mean that someone else won't, or that it's not important. So yeah, that was encouraging. It takes 100 years before they actually defeat the tripods, but it was thanks to this family that entire uprising happened, with the White Mountains and the City of Golden Lead and the Pool of Fire, and with Julius and all those wonderful things that happened. It took 100 years for it to get to that point, but it did get there. And if they had just seen things as hopeless, or that, why bother because we won't ever see the outcome, they still did it. So yeah, all done with my nails. I am so sorry that I lost the footage to what I was doing in my previous video. I think that's the second time in a row I've done that. It's because I didn't Anyway, I know why it happened, but sorry again. If you liked this video, let me know by giving it a thumbs up. It's how I decide what kind of videos to make. Make sure and subscribe and hit the notifications bell so that you'll know when I upload new videos. And you can see my they're so pretty. Even though I don't really like the black, they're still pretty. They're mostly covered up by this transfer paper. I will see you in the next one. Bye.